Hey, welcome back everybody to another edition of Math is My Jam, where math is my jam and I want it to be your jam. Go ahead and make sure you hit subscribe at the bottom and make sure you give me a like. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about lowest common denominator, or you may hear least common denominator. With least common denominator, it's the first step in being able to add and subtract fractions. We have to make sure that our denominators are the same. Right now, as you can see, I have two denominators here. I have a denominator of 4 and a denominator of 5. And I need to be able to turn those into equivalent fractions so that they have the same denominator before I can add or subtract. In this case, before I can add. Okay? The only real skill you need here is being able to skip count. If you can list out the multiples of 4 and 5, you have all the prerequisites to be able to do this problem. And when you're listing out your multiples, always try to list the first 5 multiples, stop, and then check. Now, once you have both of your sets of data, you listed your first 5 multiples, you're going to go ahead and check both parts of data, both lines of data, to see if there's a number that shows up in both lines of data. If you have a number that shows up in both, you definitely want to see what's the smallest number that shows up in both sets of data. Circle those two numbers, and that's going to become your common denominator. As you can see, the number that showed up in both data sets was 20. That was the smallest number that showed up in both data sets. So that's my lowest common denominator, or my least common denominator. Okay, here's my new fraction, and I want to find my least common denominator. So go ahead and pause the video and see if you can find your least common denominator, and then play again so that you can see if you got the correct answer. Okay, so I've listed my first 5 multiples, but I don't see a number that shows up in both data sets. So what I'll do here, I'll go ahead and list my next 5 multiples and see if there's a number that shows up in both sets of data. Okay, and so I started to list my next 5 multiples, but I figured out that the 28 shows up in both sets of data. And so I went ahead and stopped, and I circled my two numbers because I found my least common denominator. So 28 will be my least common denominator. Now for the next problem, same as we did last time, go ahead and pause the video and see if you can find your least common denominator for this new fraction. We have 3/6 minus 2/9, and we just want to find our least common denominator. If you found that 18 was your least common denominator, you are correct. So guys, as you can see, it's fairly simple, really easy to find your least common denominator. You just list out your multiples and find the smallest number that shows up in both sets of data. Okay?